Jack, you were instrumental in the ski marathon, weren't you?
Yes, one of the founders. It is an interesting story. I mean, I'm the recreation director in Westfield at that time. Would have been 1978. I get a call out of the blue from the lieutenant governor's office. I have to tell you, I don't usually get calls from the lieutenant governor's office in Westfield. I was relatively new to the job there. Totally caught me off guard. This woman's name is Ann Burrell. She's an assistant to Marianne Krupsak, who was the lieutenant governor then. And she starts out by saying, well, I was in a meeting with Don Hogan, at that point the director of the Visitors Bureau here, and a tireless promoter of the county. And I knew something was coming as soon as I heard Don's name. And Don and I knew each other. And she said, we were talking about the fact that there are ski marathons in several places in the country, and they're great draws for communities at an off time. If they're largely summer communities, this draws people in, and it's great for community sport and so on and so forth. And Don said that Chautauqua County would host one, and he said you would chair it.
That's so, Don, yeah.
And any of you knew Don. That's not unusual. So it turned out that for some reason I said yes. I checked with some friends and colleagues in Westfield. Ended up being largely driven by some friends in the Westfield Naval Rotary Club, actually. And we ran it for 11 years. From the first one was in the winter of '79. At one point, we drew 1,300 entrants from. I think we missed 2 states over the years. I don't think we ever had a skier from Nevada or something, and Hawaii, but. And also a half dozen foreign countries. The first winter, so we're really smart. We're going to have something really unusual for the first event, and we say, okay, we're going to bring the winner back. We figure we're bringing it back from Pittsburgh or from Cleveland or from Vermont. First winner, Per Jacobson from Norway. Yeah. He was an exchange student at Lancaster High, 17-year-old. Incredible skier, and we were not about to go back on our word, so we brought him back. We raised the money, we paid his airfare, brought him back, put him up. He stayed with one of our volunteers, and it was an amazing example of a purely volunteer event. We formed our own private nonprofit corporation. We had officers. Involved 300 volunteers on the day of the event, something like 9 or 10 volunteer fire companies, 2 or 3 levels of law enforcement, 40 porta-johns. The logistics were really incredible, and none of us knew anything about it when we started, but became the largest ski marathon east of the Mississippi.
And you started, the first couple of years, you were in Panama, right?
Yeah, we started at Panama Rocks, and then we shifted to a bigger field down on a farm in Clymer that actually took the course down an unplowed road. We actually skied into Pennsylvania. Very few people knew that because the road just sort of looped into Pennsylvania. There are no signs, no border guards, but you did ski into Pennsylvania, and then ended up at the Snowmobile Club because the Snowmobile Club was a key ally. And one of the more interesting developments of the whole event was that skiers and snowmobilers aren't necessarily two common audiences, and for the event they were. We worked together on trail access and grooming and common concerns about being outdoors and enjoying this area. So yeah, I still get people walk up to me in Chautauqua, tap me on the shoulder and say, you don't know who I am, but I know you. I skied in the marathon in '81, and I'm telling you, I finished. You know, and I just got a letter from a woman in Minnesota whose son skied when he was 16, and he's now obviously in his 50s, late 50s, and he's skiing another marathon, and he wanted information about how he finished. I don't remember. This is the honest answer, but yeah, it was great. It was a great time.
Well, when you started Panama Rocks, my parents owned property contiguous to Panama Rocks. So you'd come down the Polder Road.
Yep.
And the balloons and all this stuff. So it blew away and Jeff Follinsby and I skied at one of the first ones. And there's a movie of my mother took of us skiing, which is great, and seeing us at the very end of this marathon, which we finished. we can say we finished.
Still have your gold medal?
You could see Jeff and I walking. My mother's watching us as we're coming. It wasn't even a walk. It was a painful,
trudge,
one step at a time because we were painfully out of shape.
It was 34 miles.
It was a lot.
And we didn't have many ideal conditions over the years. We had a lot of days that were pretty darn challenging. I can remember taking people off. We had school buses positioned at checkpoints, and we were monitoring people's safety and well-being along the way. But the wind chill was so bad coming across one field that we had people who were literally snowblind and frostbit. They were wandering 50, 75 yards off the trail, and we were literally walking out into this field and grabbing them and trying to guide them back and sticking them on a bus to get them back. That was one of the first years. We had a lot of challenging times and some great personal interest stories about the person that had overcome a particular illness, or 3 generations skiing, 4 generations one year, incredibly. Those are great stories. That's why we did it. It was so much like Chautauqua. It was a people thing.
Yeah.
It was a people thing. It was an event, but it was a people thing.
How many times did you spend a lot of time at the Palestra in Franklin Field?
Yes, I love the Palestra in Franklin Field. Yeah, I went to University of Pennsylvania. Little known fact, I doubt that anyone in this room knows what my major was in college, and I'm willing to expose it here.
Okay, cool.
I was a religious philosophy major, actually. Great liberal arts major. I was leaning towards sociology, but there were 400 or 600 majors at Penn that were taking sociology. You wouldn't get close to a professor, and they called it religious thought. That major had 13 majors, and there were 11 faculty. It was a great experience, and a really challenging liberal arts sort of presentation. And Penn was great. We lived in the Palestra for basketball, and Franklin Field for the Penn relays, and the Eagles played there when I was there. So on Sundays, you dare not get out of the dorms because you'd get run over by. They just poured through campus. Those were fun years.
Where was hometown? Where were you born?
Born in Kenmore. Both my wife and I went to Kenmore West. She went to Kenmore East. Gave us 2 proms to go to, 2 homecoming dances. It was really a good deal. And we're still married, so that hasn't hurt. Just ran into a classmate of mine again. It was the small stories. You ran into him here at Chautauqua at the golf course. Came walking in and had some archival photos because we're getting ready to celebrate our 100th anniversary up there. And we were talking, and it turns out he's from Buffalo. And then the next thing I know, I said, "Where are you from in Buffalo?" He says, "Kenmore." I said, "Kenmore West," which was, I knew by his age that it would have been Kenmore West. And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "What year?" He graduated a year after me. It was a big school. I didn't know. Yeah.
You need to tell everybody about your wife, too, because she has had a remarkable impact on this county. And
Diane started out, the good news for us, it was that Diane was a nurse, because we bought our farm, which is up on the Burdick Road outside of Hartfield, 40 years ago this June, actually. And neither of us had jobs, one of the brighter things that we've done. But it was a great piece of property, and we were moving from Philadelphia, having grown up in Buffalo, and we wanted a rural experience, a rural lifestyle. We didn't have kids at that point. And we found this old farm, 50 acres and a house, and a fixer-upper, and we bought it, and neither of us had jobs. So now what are you going to do? Well, luckily Diane is a registered nurse. And so she did some private duty nursing for a while, and then she caught on at Westfield Hospital. And when our second child, our son Jake, was born, when she was ready to go back to the hospital, she wasn't offered the same position. She was going to have to work some swing shifts again and some weekends, and she'd gotten used to having some time with the kids, obviously. And Dr. Robert Burke had just been invited to the county as county health commissioner and intended to set up a private family practice as part of the arrangement to get him here, a Canadian doctor. And Bob met Di and said, "Do you want to start this practice with me?" And at one point it was just the 2 of them and a part-time receptionist. And the practice is now 33 years old. Hugely expanded. She is almost fully retired. She's trying to finish up a few last things. And the other part of her nursing, which Charlie knows well, is she's also the Amish nurse, because our farm is right in the middle of the Amish farms outside of Hartfield. outside of Mayville. And for many years, she and Bob delivered all the babies. And so she would, as every good nurse, do most of the work, and then the doctor would come and deliver the baby and go home, and Di would stay around and finish up. But that's a very vivid memory for both of us, is of, they didn't have one stinking baby in the middle of the afternoon. Everyone was at 3 or 4 in the morning. I mean, it was so consistent. And you'd hear this clop, 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 clop in the driveway as they pulled their buggy in, and then you'd hear the whomp, whomp, whomp on the back door. And we knew because she'd been seeing the expectant mother during the weeks before, and she'd trudge out there, and this earnest-looking man would peer in the door. He says, "Diane, I think it's time." You know, and Diane knew that it probably wasn't time, in fact, but that he was nervous. And she would dutifully get up, take her black bag, and go down and examine the mom, and oftentimes come back, try to get another hour's sleep before she said, I better go back down there. So I think she and Bob probably delivered, I don't know, over the course of the 8 or 10 years they were delivering babies, they must have delivered 40 or 50 babies. Some of the kids, of course, still live there, and we often ask how old you are, or how old they are, because it gives us an idea that Di actually was part of the delivery. So.
We'll talk about the Amish, Frank, a little bit. I'm not sure we all know that much. Their schooling, their intercommunications, their obviously the clop, clop, clop. They didn't pick up a phone and say they had a problem.
No, I'd say the Amish that live with us, and their farms surround ours now, are pretty much old order Amish. And so they still don't have electricity, they don't have indoor plumbing, they don't have cell phones. Now there are a number of Amish, and many of them work on the grounds that you'll see with cell phones, and those our Amish would refer to them as Ohio Amish, and in fact most of them do come from Ohio. This is, did any of you remember the movie with Harrison Ford, Witness? Is that what it's called? Okay. Maybe you remember this scene, because it's an Amish joke. We watch the movie every once in a while just to be the ones that know to laugh. There's a scene when Harrison Ford, who's hiding out in an Amish farm in order to keep himself safe and protect an Amish witness, as I recall. He's got the dress, the Amish dress, and he goes to town with some of the Amish men to go to the hardware store or whatever. And they ride their buggy in. And when they come out, there are a couple of young townies who are there, and they start taunting the young Amish man that is one of the group that traveled with Harrison Ford. And of course they're pushing him and trying to goad him into it, and he's being peaceful. And Harrison Ford, of course, you can see is starting to steam. And at a certain point, Harrison Ford leaps out of the buggy and decks the townie. And everybody is totally aghast that this Amish man would show this violence. And the old man sitting in the buggy does this, and he says, "He's from Ohio." Because they do have, there is definitely a certain notion that the Ohio Amish are a little far out there. So, but yeah, I mean, they're wonderful neighbors. We raised our barn because Di never took any payment for any of these services, and so they always felt they owed us. They have a strong sense of barter and of fairness in that, and of course I'm useless to them, so it was all Di, you know, that built up our credits. But we built our barn in one day, 50 by 20 foot barn. We showed up, and there was a wonderful quilt on our bed that the women had come down and put on our bed while we were going to work one day. Gorgeous china cabinet in the corner of our kitchen. The oak trestle table that sits in our kitchen, I had ordered from an Amish carpenter down the road as a Christmas present for Di. I go there to pick it up 2 days before Christmas. He said, you know, he knew it was a Christmas present. I said, "Mose, you know, is my table ready?" And he says, "No, it's not ready." I said, "Mose, Christmas is the day after tomorrow. This is my Christmas present to Di." And he gets a big grin on his face. And he takes the table, because I'm looking at it. It looks finished to me. He tips the table over, and he pulls a magic marker out of his pocket, and on the bottom of the table, he scrawls, "Merry Christmas from the Mose Byler family." He gave it to me. Yeah. So I had ordered a second table, little sort of drop leaf thing that would fit at the end of this table for when we had Thanksgiving and bigger events. And I said, well, at least I'm paying you for that table. You're not getting away with this. And he says, too late. He tipped that one over, and his father, Wally, had written Merry Christmas from the Wally Byler family. So, I had to confess to Di that I hadn't paid a cent for Christmas presents. But that's, I think those are pretty indicative of the sort of relationship we've had with the Amish. We feel very very fortunate to have understood a very different culture and to have them as exceptionally good neighbors. Really, always there. When we travel now and we're gone for a while, we'll just mention to a couple of the Amish, keep an eye on the place, and a couple of the kids will do it. And when we've had projects, sometimes I've hired some of the kids and paid them off with ice cream if I've got some sort of simple grunt work that I know the kids would love to do, and put out half gallons of ice cream on the front porch. And so yeah, it's been a very good experience. They showed up. A quick Amish story. They showed up scouting farms in the fall of '76. For those of you who lived around here, you can see where this story is going. And we'd been there 2 years, and they asked, well, how are the winters up here? Because we're up on the hill. And we said, first, we've been here a couple of years, and not bad. They do a good job of plowing us out. Well, that was the winter of the blizzards. And in January, they needed the National Guard to open up our road with front end loaders. Di actually rode down. She was still at the hospital, and Di rode the snowplow down in order to get to work because they were so short-staffed in Westfield. But the Amish never forget that. There's still a few of them that were around, and it was actually this Mose and Wally that were asked that, and so yeah, that we get that hammered at us occasionally. He told us the winters weren't bad. So
you worked in Philadelphia after you got done with school, and what drew you here?
We wanted to come back to Western New York. Our family was in Buffalo, and we wanted this rural lifestyle. And frankly, we would have stayed, I think, outside of Philly had property been accessible to us. But Bucks County, Montgomery County, even then, was pretty pricey. And there's no way that we were, we'd saved everything we could. I had been working at University Hospital on Penn's campus, and I'd been working in a mental health agency. So neither of us were putting away a lot of money, but we'd saved up some. And we lived in a house with 4 or 5 other friends of mine from college, so we had cheap rent. But yeah, I think mostly we wanted to come back. We literally drew a circle in Western New York of about an hour and a half from Buffalo, reasoning that was close enough that we could have access to our family, but not on top of them and they on us. And that proved to be brilliant, actually, because being able to settle here, being able to raise our kids here, our property really defines us. And I know, there's many people in this room that have known me for a long, long time. But until you see where we live, there's a part of in my life that you don't understand. It's a beautiful place up there, and it's a very special place. And we felt it when we first saw it. That's why we bought it. We literally bought it. We never owned a house. We've been living in apartments in Philly. We took all the money we had and put it on the house.
Why is it special? Describe it.
Well, I think some places speak to you with a sort of essence. It's beautiful to look at. We live on top of a hill, almost to the top of a ridge. We can see Lake Erie from our front porch. The woods is interesting. It's not a sort of a plantation woods. It's very mixed. There's a wonderful couple of creeks that go down. It's the sort of vision, when we were thinking about wanting to buy a country place, you inevitably build up a sort of mental picture. This is what we want. And when you go to look at places, usually they don't fit. They say, that house is sort of modern and clunky, or that property is really sort of boring, or that's too much open land, or there's no view, or it's too close to the road, or you end up... When we saw that place, I think it met that mental picture so well. And to be honest, it wasn't the house, it was the land. We walked, in fact, the very first visit, we we walked all the way, it's about a half mile down to the creek in front of the house. It's a good-sized piece of property. It's 50 acres, but it's narrow. It's only 550 feet wide, so it's 4/5 of a mile front to back. Both sides of the road, which is what we liked. We controlled our destiny. If we didn't do anything, we'd own that view. And by and large, we do, except the trees have all grown up, and I've had to cut a few down so I can see the lake.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it was just it struck us as the image of what we were looking for. It surprised us, took our breath away.
For 10 years, you worked at Westfield. You worked at Westfield?
Almost 11.
Yeah. The recreation coordinator, was that the
the first ever full-time recreation director there. They were having trouble with their swimming pool, and the health department had told them they weren't going to let them open it. It's an outdoor pool at Welch Field, and so there was a volunteer recreation commission that sort of ran the recreation programs for the village and the town of Westfield, and they advertised for a part-time position. I'd been working 2 years for, again, those who've been in the area for a while, the old Turner Lumber, which is where the snowmobile place is down here. Well, here's a trivia question. Do you know who was a colleague of mine? This had been the mid-'70s, 74 and 75. A colleague of mine, currently a full-time employee at Chautauqua, that all of you would know, but he and I worked together at Turner Lumber. We were the two staff members. Bill knows because Bill was one of our customers. That's how I first met Bill 40 years ago. And Wayne Vergeth is his partner, and Carol. Al Aiken. And a third member of the little group was Maritza Morgan's son Kip, who runs the golf course Willow Run down the road. So there you go. It was an interesting sort of convergence of people that would find each other in other ways later in life. But the Westfield experience was great. It's a wonderful community. At a certain point, after 10, 11 years, I think the village had to recognize that they weren't going to let me do much more. I had stretched them pretty far in terms of ambitions and developing programs and trying to enhance facilities, and it was a small community, and it's only 3,500 people or so. But wonderful town, and got involved with the Rotary Club there, which was also a real formative thing for me for about 20 years. So.
How'd you end up here, Chautauqua?
Dick Reddington, actually, who ended up hiring me. But Dick and I had met through a state organization, the New York State Recreation and Park Society, which sort of represents the profession in the state. And I had been very active in Western New York and actually helped found an affiliate part of that state organization called Southern Tier Recreation and Parks. And Dick, at that point, was the director of education, youth, and recreation. And he attended some meetings. We got talking. He was raising sheep. I was raising goats. We both had sports backgrounds. We instantly hit it off. So we became friends outside of our respective jobs. And then at a certain point, he was in the middle of a transition in his office, and a process that continues today with Chautauqua. When somebody's leaving, there's always a chance to look at whether things could be reorganized in some way. And he had 17 department heads reporting to him before I started. Wow. And obviously recognized that he couldn't pay a lot of attention to that many, and the youth and recreation part was something he could see being pulled out. And when I started, actually, it was quite different. At Chautauqua, I had the existing youth and rec. So I had children's school, boys and girls club, youth activities center. There was no college club then. Tennis, beaches, and sports club. 6 departments. And then I had special studies, which at that point was very small, 100 and some courses, probably 65, 70 faculty. And then I also handled capital budget for his departments, and I also placed students in dorm rooms, which is I never forgiven him actually for that. That was a crazy job, which didn't have any connection to anything, but he was trying to figure out how to get these things done with the available staff, and some of those things dropped by the wayside. But and then of course my job here at Chautauqua has just been one of constant change for 27 years. I mean, there's 12 departments that I was responsible for before I retired from most of them a couple of years ago, from the 6. Whole things, the fitness center and the sailing center and the golf course came to recreation. The college club was created, the Young Readers Program, the Family Entertainment Series, all sort of emerged out of this greater community. So,
paint a picture for us in 1987 when you joined. What was your first of all? Maybe go back even further. What was your impression of Chautauqua Institution when you bought your place above Hartsfield? What did you know about this place?
Yeah, to be honest, very little. Had not been a location that either Dies or my family had visited. Any times we came to the southern tier, it was to Allegheny State Park. I don't believe I'd ever set foot on the place until the first. It was before I started, but it would have been. Was it '86? The first Soviet. That was probably my first visit to Chautauqua. Was for that. And my first impressions, particularly of the youth and rec side, was that it was a wreck. I mean, the Boys and Girls Club was just so in need. I mean, we were parking cars in the middle of the ball field, and the tennis courts, as you recall, were cantilevered down the hill, and held up with boards and stuff, and it was such a wonderful historic program, but really needed to be reinvested in. Children's school, we collapsed one of the floors during an open house. That's how we got the children's school renovation, by the way, in '94. We had no choice. We had all these parents in one of the classrooms, and all of a sudden this creaking sound, and it sagged right. Luckily, there was only about 18 inches down to the ground, but the whole thing just literally sagged. And very quickly, donors stepped forward, as happens at Chautauqua, and we had a wonderfully renovated children's school. Still kept a lot of the flavor of the old place, but we dropped the ceilings for one thing, so it wasn't so intimidating to those kids with these high, dark ceilings. Awful for little guys. But yeah, it was. My impression was there were lots of things for me to get involved with, and that's why I was being hired. I mean, so I saw it as the challenge being put in front of me.
You saw that. You saw the state of the condition of the Chautauqua facilities. Did you have to deal with Charlie Hines at all about facilities?
Well, yeah. I mean, Charlie and I were talking briefly about how fortunate we were to be part of so many projects. I don't think either of us could have envisioned that period of time from, what would you think?
Well, I started in '93 when children's school and library were both wrapping up. Those are the first two projects that I was involved with, and my gosh, it's been
almost ever since. But I would say that 10-year period, let's say between '93 and 2003.
Well, 2008 or 9 with all of the.
Yeah. No, that's true. Yeah, it's been a constant ride. I don't think I ever imagined I would have a job that would involve so much work with thinking about design and thinking about program function versus design, and listening to architects talk about their vision, and beginning to learn about the bid process from Charlie and so on. Now, this is I have to admit, I can do that now because I'm mostly retired. I made up my job. I mean, I didn't come to the job in Westfield or the job in Chautauqua with a whole lot of direct experience in what I was being asked to do. What I had was that good, solid liberal arts education. I knew how to learn, and I was not afraid. In fact, I enjoy taking on that sort of challenge. So back in Westfield, I didn't know anything about fixing a swimming pool, for Pete's sakes. I was out there with a jackhammer the first summer I worked, digging up a leaking pipe. The streets department guys got a kick out of it. They'd say, well, if you want it fixed, go fix it yourself. I mean, it was sort of the new guy on the block, and I got the jackhammer that they lent me, and I blasted away for a while and found this fitting that had separated, and we got it fixed and poured some. I'm out there with a couple bags of Saccharine. I mean, it was primitive, but that's I guess I've been fortunate to be allowed to learn on the job and to apply things as you go along. Every time you do something, the sailing center. One of the things I'm most proud of is that Turney Sailing Center. Because of the relationship to the Turney family, which was moving. I mean, they took me in as part of their family, and we, you know, we established a certain emotional bond over 7 years on that project. That didn't come about overnight. That was a 7-year process before that sailing center was built. And but I didn't know a darn thing about sailing. I still don't. Well, I know more than I did then, I guess. But you don't have to know everything about everything in order to do a good job about advocating. You learn to find people you respect and who know more than you, and you have to admit, obviously, that they know more than you. And then you go from there. We met before the sailing department was even founded. I met with a group of sailors every Sunday before church the whole summer. And it was really just to sort of conceive of what a sailing department would be at Chautauqua. I wasn't the one to design it, but I was the one to try to put the pieces together. So yeah, I've been very lucky to be part of all that.
Well, as an advocate, you have to obviously deal with, as you being a part of, donors and the administration. Certainly the impression is change comes slowly, deliberately at Chautauqua. Talk to me from an inside of the challenges and maybe the opportunities.
Yeah, you know, the old joke, of course, at Chautauqua is how many Chautauquans does it take to change a light bulb? Change? But this place has changed, and I think it's really changed quite dramatically. But in an environment that's as old as Chautauqua is, you know, it's sort of a relative process. If we were 20 years old and you'd seen the things that had happened in the last 20 years, oh my God, the place is like, you know, it's this and then it was that. But it's 140 years old, and so it seems as if things don't change. But again, any of us that have been around for even 25, 30 years see a tremendous amount of change to this place. Not all of it are things that we're fond of or things should have happened. That's the way. I mean, that's how change works. You're not happy. Heck, when we moved the tennis courts from the main gate to here, yeah, I was vilified for over a year. I mean, people told me I was going to cause their heart attacks because they were going to have to trudge all the way up. I said, "You're playing tennis," you know. But it was an emotional tie, and I understood that. It still was the great opportunity to build an absolutely world-class tennis center by trading off the sale of some of those lots. We never would have been able to improve tennis here. I could never have recommended putting money into that old tennis center. Never. It was in the wrong place. But change was difficult, and I recognize that. There were people who literally cried over that transition and still aren't happy that it moved, but I think they have to admit that it's a great tennis center. So.
Was that the toughest thing?
That's probably the one that I got the most heat over. There were some very difficult days for me.
It was nasty.
It got nasty.
Honest, it was really dirty and nasty.
Yeah, it got nasty. Yeah, it was hard. And Dick and Charlie and Joe Johnson, who had been around battles before, were really important at that point because it was hard not to just say, you know. Yeah, that was a hard time. One of the lowlights, and yet I look back and I'm proud of this whole thing. I mean, this campus with the tennis center, the fitness center, and the natural play space out there in the woods won an award from the state. Yeah, I'm proud of that. It's good. It's very good.
Yeah.
We have people still coming here to see it. The tennis courts themselves individually got a National Tennis Court Builders Award. So it was right, but it was nasty. It was hard.
So that was a proactive, constructive thing that happened here. Was there things that, as you reflect back on, gosh, I wish I could have been a better advocate to get something done that actually didn't get through?
Well, yeah, especially now looking at it, I wish I'd have been more successful in helping others in the administration or the board to see the need for recreation to be included in the same way that other program areas are in terms of endowment, in terms of philanthropy. In general, the recreation side, not the youth side certainly But in general, the recreation side doesn't have the underpinning that I think it would be so helpful to keeping our investment strong. I mean, to be good stewards of all this investment that we've made in, I mean, look at the tennis center, the improvements of the golf course, and so on, the fitness center. But you have to have an underpinning to keep it healthy. And I don't know that I've been as successful as I would have liked to have been in terms of that sort of advocacy. And some of it's just a philosophical difference. Obviously, I got a vested interest in that. I would love to see that supported in certain ways, and others see that as more of an enterprise area, one that should be making money and showing a net. I understand that in some areas, but in this context, in this community, golf course being a great example. If this golf course were even located 40 miles to the north, just slightly south of Buffalo, it would be a gold mine. It's not. It's located where there aren't enough golfers, and there's still plenty of golf courses around. So it's a struggle to make this golf course show a positive net. It's not anybody's fault. It's just it's just the reality, and that's why I would say, in answer to that question, that's an area that I wasn't really successful in winning that argument, but I keep making it.
So while we're talking about this area, we both went through the merger and the accession of this property into Chautauqua, all of which was big community issues. Your kids went to Mayville, mine went to Chautauqua, and never the twain should ever meet back in those days, except on, of course, sports fields. And you were on the school board. Yeah,
I was a member of the charter school board. I believe it still is the largest candidate pool for any school board election in New York State. I believe there are 36 people running for 7 seats for the merged district. And I was fortunate, and I will say I was fortunate. As much work as it was, I was fortunate to be one of the 7, and one of only 2 who had not served on one or the other of the boards. Jay Baker from the Chautauqua board continued to serve, and from the Mayville board, Randy Henderson, Pam Perdue, Jim Tennis, and Virginia Scriven all came over from the Mayville board, and then Jill Scott and myself were the other 7. And that was an era. It was a very interesting thing here at Chautauqua, because I'd been elected to the school board, and now you had the notion of building sales, which didn't happen right away. I mean, the merger, actually, we're sitting in the room in which the vote was taken, the second vote in the Chautauqua district. First vote went down, passed in Mayville overwhelmingly, and went down in Chautauqua. And there was a stipulation in the law that allowed for a community to bring the vote back one more time if they voted down. Mayville did not have to vote again, but Chautauqua had the opportunity. They got enough signatures on a petition, put it back on the ballot, and it was voted on a second time. It was Valentine's Day, 1996, I believe. The Valentine's Day Massacre, some people called it. And the swing was 14 people. The vote was 27 more in favor than not. So it was really just 14 people changed that election. And I had been asked, for no particular reason, this was obviously prior to running for the school board because there wasn't a merged district yet, but I'd been asked, I guess just as a community person, to be one of the, I don't know, ballot watchers, or there's some term for that, but to just sit and check names and do this sort of policing of it, and there were 4 or 5 of us. So I sat literally right here, and at the end of the evening, as we tallied the votes and they were verified and so on, and we made the announcement, there were people bursting into tears, sobbing, screaming. There were people hugging and cheering and laughing. It was a bizarre and memorable evening. And at that point, I think I decided that I had a somewhat unique perspective that might be helpful, because I worked at Chautauqua and I lived in Mayville. I lived in the Mayville district. And as it turned out, I think it was helpful, but it was tricky when the institution and the school board negotiated this so I'm sitting at school board meetings and constantly having to be removed from our own executive sessions when we're talking about the negotiations. Jay Baker, our president of the board, was doing most of the negotiations with Dan Bratton and others I'm sure were in the room, but largely it was the two of them. And they developed a lifelong friendship. I mean, Jay and I were with Dan just days before he passed away. It was a very special thing, I know, for Jay, as it was for me, obviously. But it was a time that I thought the need would be to sort of settle things, you know, and it's something that I guess by nature I'm a compromise guy. I'm find the path to get us to a solution here, and you could just see the rancor, and so it was an interesting sort of challenge that I thought I'd try, and the public, I suppose I was one of the names people knew because I'd been somewhat active in the community, but I ran once more. I did 6 years, and then some of my colleagues stayed on. Many of them stayed on. I chose to leave after 2 terms. That was enough, and I felt it was time for someone else to do it. And I was beat. I mean, I gave it a lot of time because you had to. If you're going to do it, I mean, we had 50 facility committee meetings in 1 year before that building was built, literally every week, and that's in addition to the regular school board meetings and the budget hearings and so on. I mean, I think that 1 year it was somewhere around 80 or 85 evening meetings. That's a lot of commitment, but I mean, that was a formative time, I think, for everybody involved, and it's changed this community and changed Chautauqua, and we're sitting in part of that. The opera facility across the street, of course, and we started shortly after the merger. We started a liaison committee, a formal committee between the institution and I still sit on that. So how many years is that? 1996. Yikes. And we just met the other day, and there's some exciting new things through some arts possibilities that Deborah Moore, who's Marty's new assistant, has some connections through the Kennedy Center, and there's some very exciting things that are possible because of the partnership. I treasure that.
If Chautauqua came to you and said, "Jack, we want to name a building after you," what building would you select?
I'd tell them forget it. You know. There's a question.
The bathrooms at the bell tower for the beach.
That would be one of the choices.
Because we heard about those probably more than most.
I heard about those. Yeah, yeah. The bathrooms at boys and girls. Actually, a number of bathrooms would be probably because we did do a fair amount of work trying to find bathrooms that worked around here. Yeah, the tennis courts would really gall a lot of people. Yeah. I don't want a building named. I hope that my time here will be seen as one of growth in areas that I think form the fabric of the community part of this place. They're bedrock stuff. They're not glitzy. They're not things that are so unusual to Chautauqua, but they're grounded, and that's what makes this a community and not just a summer place where people come and go. And that's why I think they've always been so valuable. So maybe a piece of turf somewhere. I don't know.
Charlie, what's the question we should be asking them? We're missing it.
Well, I was going to say, just following up on what Jack just said, that you asked me, Chautauqua seems to have been more rapidly changing in, pick a time period, the last 10 years. Houses are getting bigger, the people are changing, the atmosphere is changing. Is it? And Greg asked me straight out, is it changing for the better, in your view? Is it?
You know, I wouldn't say that it's changing for the better. Because I can't judge where it's going to be 20 years from now. It certainly is different. It certainly is changing. And again, I worry about the impact of the increasing number of shorter-term visitors, which is the nature of the place, and it's been happening for a long time. And and therefore the importance of these programs that still knit those people together. Because it's always been the case of people, not everybody's here all summer. Well, it's been that way for a long time. But I think the shorter it gets, and if we're not paying attention to ways to knit people together through things like special studies classes or youth programs or recreation, I mean, obviously I'm biased here, but those programs are the things that make those human connections. That's what keeps this place alive and wonderful. It's always been about relationships. It's a summer camp, for Pete's sakes. That's what summer camps are. It's about building relationships. So, I mean, we see that at the golf course. I mean, people that just want to, they just want to meet up with their friends that they've been playing golf with for a while, and they may not be great golfers, but they're having a good time, and they value that, that moment. You didn't ask me about the golf course. I mean,
well, I was just going to say, we have a few minutes of my tape, but anyways. If I'm the Golf Digest magazine, and you're celebrating your 100th anniversary, give us a thumbnail of the history of the golf course.
Sure. Actually, we're working on a book, which is not a thumbnail. Dave Turnbull, who's been a historian of the golf course for some time, in fact, I meet with Dave again tomorrow afternoon to work through edits. I'm serving as editor. He's author and I'm editor. We're fighting it out. The golf course history is really a snapshot of Chautauqua's history. I mean, there are photographs that show social gatherings up there with Tom and Mina Edison and Henry Ford standing in front of the clubhouse. They hosted a dinner for the governor of New York in 1936. Who that? Anybody know who that would have been? Landon?
No.
No.
Yeah, there we go.
Dewey.
Yeah, well, anyway. Yeah, maybe. Who knows? The founders of the club included Arthur Bester, president of the institution. This wasn't just like over there. This was an integral part of the institution. Melville Dewey was one of the founders of the golf club, invented the Dewey Decimal System. Charles Welch.
While playing golf?
While playing golf, yeah. He was a brilliant librarian and not a bad golfer. Charles Welch of Welch Foods in Westfield, one of the founders. The Norton family involved as founders of the golf course. So the history is connected, and there have been legends. We were talking before around the baseball history and legends. You want to talk about legends? Sam Snead played exhibitions at this golf course. Still owns the record for the most PGA victories. Gene Sarazen played there, one of only 5 golfers to ever win all 4 of the major tournaments. Horton Smith, the first winner of the Masters, played that golf course. And it wasn't just Amelia Earhart who landed an airplane here, and I'm going to forget their names, this is a quiz. If anybody knows this, I'd be impressed. The 2 men who were the first to fly over the North Pole from North America to Europe also landed the year before Amelia Earhart on the same hole, the hole which is now 17 on the lake course, the one that goes away from Route 394 and goes up the hill. They would come across the lake and then taxi and stop at the foot of the hill there, at the foot of the green, what's now the green. I mean, that's a history nobody else has, really. And the exhibition matches, Dave has done a great job of actually sort of recounting all of them. It's really it's a fun part of the book. So, yeah, it's really it's part of Chautauqua's history. The story of Ralph, the Egyptian statue, is tied in to, if those of you who don't know, there was an Egyptian statue discovered somewhat by chance in the early 80s. In the main gate, in the old trolley station there at the main gate, in a closet. It's 1,100 pounds, carved black granite. It's 3,000 years old. Had been given to the institution in 1981 to the museum here by the Egypt Exploration Society of London. Who knows why? But it sat there apparently for a long time with nobody knowing that it was there until someone discovered it, and it sold at Sotheby's auction house for $343,000. The money was put into a capital, sort of a revolving capital fund that was to be used for enterprise-type projects that could generate revenue and thus, in quotes, pay back a loan to that fund, and then it could be used again. The bookstore was a beneficiary, as was the golf course when the second 18 was built. That's where the seed money came from to build the second 18 was from. And Ralph, he got the name Ralph from a young Fredonia student who was working here and who did a lot of the legwork in trying to figure out who the heck Ralph was. She nicknamed him Ralph. And they did. They searched it out, going to all sorts of Egyptologists, and they definitely know who this person was. So, yeah, it's a very special history. It's a very special history.
What's the result going to be? You're going to have a book? It's going to be...
Yeah. There will be a book. With any luck, there'll be a book by the season. It's a big job to put a book together. Dave's done a great job of writing. I'm trying to get it, in a form that is concise enough and readable enough, and we're adding the pictures now because there's a lot of great photos, not as many as we'd like. Actually, Stan Marshhouse dragged out of the fire in 1976, I think, is when the clubhouse burnt down, the old clubhouse, the colonial-style clubhouse. And Stan, the story goes, Stan got up there, and the people were trying to get stuff out of the clubhouse, and they were carrying furniture. And he said, we can replace the furniture, but the whole inside of the clubhouse is filled with these old historic photos of Gene Sarazen and C.F. Snead, Ben Hogan, Walter Hagen. They're all in there. So he started running around and gathered up the photos, and we still have them, thanks to that little bit of effort. And many of those will be reproduced in the book. So, yeah, it should be available by the summer. We'll put them at the bookstore, and I just hope to sell enough to get the money back that we're investing in doing the book. But it'll be a great treasure for the golf course, a good permanent part of our record. So we even have a mannequin dressed up in knickers up in the pro shop right now. It's a flat hat, knickers, Argyle, yeah.
So you're Payne Stewart look-alike?
Yeah, sort of. And I have committed to wearing knickers to a number of the member tournaments this summer. So if you really want to see something scary, you can come see that.
What's the Jack Voelker legacy?
Well, I think we've recounted it. It's the point A to point B process over the last 27 years. I love going to the family entertainment series and knowing that I sort of made that up. I started it in Smith Wilkes Hall, hiring some people that I used to hire in Westfield, folk singers, kids performers, and we used to charge $1 at the door. And I would stand there and take the dollar bills from people, stuff them in my pocket, absolute truth. I'd walk backstage and I'd count them out and I'd pay the performer, hoping that I had enough to pay them the $200 or $150 or whatever they were charging me to do the performance. We've come a long way since then, and now of course there's some in the amp, but I think that's one thing I'm proud of, because it spoke to an obvious need in the community, and we started it so modestly, and it took hold. Young Readers Program, certainly, because I know the stories that parents have related about kids who've learned and learned to love reading more as a result of being exposed to some of those books and programs. And the whole. I'm particularly proud of that whole club transition as well, because of what condition it was before. I think that's something that.
It's funny, Jake. The day of that fire, some of us were working in the department and carrying stuff around.
What's your best Charlie Hines story?
Best Charlie Hines story?
Just how easy and smooth and...
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, how we always saw eye to eye. We have absolutely identical political views. We probably can't get any farther apart on that side. That's probably my best story. How could two people be such good friends and colleagues over the years and be so diametrically opposed? Yeah.
We don't talk about it.
We don't talk about it. Yeah, but we have so many other things in common that we do fine. So yeah.
Well, one of the things you do have in common is both you guys have had a tremendous effect on Chautauqua Institution, and it's much better because of both of you. And so, Jack, thank you for coming to share.
You're welcome. Good fun. Yeah. I apologize for the gravelly voice. It's, as my kids always said, whenever I got a little laryngitis, I've got a classic end of the winter cold. It was my penance for loving to talk so much, because they usually use the joke that, yeah, Dad, it'll take you 15 minutes to introduce yourselves. You know, they start walking around yawning, but that's kids.